Hello, my name is Madhur and welcome to Chess Times 24. So today we are learning how to do the checkmate in one move. It's very simple to understand. See the position that if you came to know that after watching the position you will realize that yes you can do the checkmate in one. How to understand that matters a lot always. So you are playing, let's say, from white side. Here, what happens is that simply checkmate in one. You should start thinking about your opponent's king. That first of all, what are the possibilities for that king to move? Once if you came to know that yes, these are the possibilities, it's just that how to trap that king that matters a lot. You have to simply control those squares where the king is standing right now and ready to move on to another square. That's what the mate in one positions are all about. Here into this position, what I found that my bishop is simply pinning this pawn and it's white's turn to play. And my rook is standing here. So the king is completely safe onto a8 square and ready to move on to a7 square. What I'm doing here? Simply, I came to know that my rook, if the rook is capturing the pawn, then not only this rook is capturing the pawn, the rook started controlling both the squares, and the pawn cannot capture it because the bishop is simply pinning that pawn, and the pawn is an example of absolute pin. Soon we will come to know about what are the types of pins and how to pin opponent's pieces. But for this, simply capturing the pawn and simply doing checkmate that matters. So not here, white won the game. Moving on to the next. Into this position, what I came to know that yes, I am playing from white side right now and the king is standing here, but there is no other space for this king to move. So I can do easily checkmate if I am moving the bishop onto f6 square and bishop is giving check. These two squares and the bishop and the rook, both the pieces are controlling this one square and the rook is controlling this square as well. So the king has no space to move and this is checkmate. Moving on to the next. Into this position, it's white to play checkmate in one. I came to know if you should start thinking about opponent's king because the king is the most important piece of the board. And if we want to win the game, then we have to trap opponent's king. I am thinking about this king. I came to know that the king is completely safe onto f6 square and ready to move onto f5 square. The king cannot capture the knight because the pawn is already protecting. The king cannot come here because this pawn is controlling that square. So king is safe completely here and ready to move onto f5 square. If I am moving the rook onto f7 square, so my rook is giving check followed by the support of the knight and the king has no space to move. Next. Into this position, we are playing from white side. I am quickly thinking about this king that the king is standing onto h8 square and what are the possibility for that king to move. What I came to know, king can be moved onto h7 square. The king cannot move here because the bishop is already controlling that square. So moving the rook onto h1 and giving check and mate simply. So the king has no space to. Moving on to the next. Here again, it's white to play checkmate in one. The king has no space to move onto any other square. The king cannot capture the knight because the pawn is protecting. The king can be moved onto c8 square. That possibility is there. So king is onto b8 square, and c8 square is the place where the king can be moved. And this bishop is pinned by the rook, so bishop cannot move onto any other square. And it's white's turn to play. So simply, if your two pieces are controlling the square, where you have to make sure that if any piece is giving check to the king, then you will get support of another piece. I am not even considering this bishop because the bishop is completely pinned by my rook. So I'm moving the rook onto a8 square, followed by the support of this knight. The rook is giving check to the king, and the king has no space to move. Moving on to the next. Into this position, we are playing from white side. See what are the possibilities for that king to move. First of all, every time whenever we are solving mate in one positions, we have to start thinking about opponent's king. Yes, the king is standing onto c7 square, and king. Can this king will move here, here, and here? Is it possible? No, it is not possible because the rook is controlling these three important squares. The king cannot move here because the pawn is controlling. The king cannot move here because this pawn is controlling. So might be the king can be moved on to d6 square. These two squares where the king feel safe. So what I came to know that my rook is simply pinning this pawn, and the pawn cannot change its file. Only if I am moving the knight onto b5 square, not only this knight is giving check to the king, the knight started controlling this square as well, and this is checkmate. Moving on to the next. Into this position, we are playing from white side, and it's white to play checkmate in one. So what we are doing, that simply start thinking firstly about opponent's king. The king cannot move here. The king cannot move here. King can be moved onto f7 square. Conclusion is the king is completely safe onto e8 square and ready to move onto f7 square. How to control these two squares to do the checkmate? And what are the possibilities related to this? It means, firstly, how I am solving these positions, it is very simple. Firstly, quickly I'm thinking about the king, opponent's king, that what are the possibilities for that king to move. And when I came to know that these two squares are there related to it, you have to start finding out the check which your piece is ready to give to that king. So I came to know that king onto e8, ready to move on to f7. This diagonal, can I give this check to the king? And there will be no other option for that king to move, and white is simply winning this game. Moving on to the next. Into this position, we are playing from white side, and it's white to play checkmate in one. Quickly, I am thinking about this king, that can this king will move here? No, it is not possible because the knight is controlling. The king is moving here. No, not because the knight is controlling the square. The king cannot move here, here as well because the pawn is controlling these two squares. So conclusion is the king has no space to move, right? What are the possibilities for that king to move? There is no other possibility. Thing is that if the knight is doing good job, and the pawn, all the pawns, these pawns are controlling the squares. Conclusion is this pawn, if we are moving forward onto e4 square, simply we are doing checkmate to opponent's king. Moving on to the next. Here again we have to start thinking about opponent's king. The king is standing onto g8 square. Again, there is no other space for this king to move because all the squares white pieces are controlling, right? So there is no other option. Simply white to play checkmate in one. Simply we are moving this pawn forward, followed by the support of the knight. Simply we are doing checkmate to opponent's king. Now, final position of today's session that yes, this is our upcoming topic. Soon I will update this. It is the position is related to double check. Here, what happens is if I see the position carefully, again I am thinking about this king. So the conclusion is king has no space to move, and what I am doing that I am simply moving the pawn forward and promoting the pawn to the knight. See why they have given four options always. Every time promoting the pawn to the queen will not work. We have to take the decision according to the position that what matters a lot. Pawn promotion. Every time queen will not help you. Sometimes, the knight, sometimes the bishop, sometimes the rook can help you into this. That's why they have given four options to us. So what we are doing, this is our upcoming topic. This is called as double check, where the knight is giving check to the king. The rook is also giving check to the king. If you see, both the pieces are under attack, but no one will capture it because both the pieces are giving check to the king, and the king has no space to move because the bishop is controlling these two squares. Right, so hope you enjoyed today's session and you found means it is fruitful for you to understand and how to solve mate in one puzzle. I have given you some kind of basic understanding that how to solve these positions. So yes, that's it for today's session. If you really and like the session, please like and subscribe the channel as well. That's it for today's session. Bye bye and take care.